Seth, welcome to Millionaire University. So happy to have you join us here today. And I love where I get to sit because I get to hear about so many different variations on how to make money, how to build a business. And I have to say, I don't know that I've ever really spoken to anyone with your particular background, your knowledge, the way that you've made your money. So thanks for being willing to come on and pull back the curtain of your business today.
Yeah. Hey, Kirsten. Absolutely. Glad to be here and happy to get into it.
Amazing. Okay, so your platform retipster.com has become a go-to resource for real estate investors. Can you walk us through your journey from where you started to building this whole educational community?
Yeah, sure. So I started RE Tipster back in 2012. And the reason I started that was because I had been working as a land investor for about 5 years prior to that. And after working as a land investor and just building up my own little, mental library of knowledge about how the business works and the hardest things to overcome and little tips and tricks of how I dealt with various challenges, I started to realize like this is actually kind of worth something. Like I kind of have
Mm,
a lot of knowledge about this niche that I can share with the world. And for the few people out there who are interested in this, like I can really solve a lot of these problems for them so they don't have to go through the pain that I did. And it started as an experiment. RE Tipster, just maybe I'll put some content out there. Maybe people will find it. I don't know. Let's just give it a shot. And I actually found it was really fun. And I never expected that because I was terrible at like
mm,
writing papers in college. Like I almost failed English 101. I was so bad at it. But once I got to write about the stuff that I really cared about, like I was actually pretty good because like
mm.
the passion and the love was there to make it work. So I started putting content out there and people started telling me like, this is awesome, Seth. Like, I hope you never stop doing this. This is like the best thing ever. That was really encouraging. So I just kept doing it. And what started as a little land investing business back in 2009, when I started that, I mean, that alone was its own very profitable thing where I would buy land for a really cheap price and then sell it for a higher price. It was really fairly simple business to run. But just the knowledge of how to do that morphed into this whole separate business of creating content online and finding ways to solve people's problems who are working in that business.
Mm.
And yeah, it's just been an awesome ride.
Cool. I'm sorry I called it retipster,
Oh, no
re-tipster. That
problem.
makes a lot more sense the way it's written.
Nope. More than half the people
Amazing.
call it that at first. So
Yeah.
no worries.
So cool. I love that. I see this pattern a lot with entrepreneurs of you always have to start with the next obvious thing, right? Like, this is an opportunity I see. Let me learn how to do this. Most people who end up in a coaching role or in a mentorship role did not anticipate that that was going to be the next level or like 5 levels into their business, but they find so much reward in it because you can so clearly remember all of the things that went into building and learning and understanding how to be successful in the business. And I think this is even kind of a stigma I think needs to be broken in the formal education industry. We have a lot of educators that haven't actually gone and done the thing. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing, which is really cool. And I love that you found that there's an opportunity there. And we've all been there. We've all sat in a classroom and felt like we're not good at a certain thing. We're not great writers. My husband yesterday was just saying, I actually am a really great writer. I just wasn't writing about things I cared about in
Yeah.
college, you know? But when I
Yeah.
did, then it was amazing. So I love that insight. Such a cool thing to hear the transition. So now let's jump back in time. With all that being said, you mentioned that you started with land investing. And so what made you focus on that particularly when so many people in real estate and investment focus on residential or commercial properties? And how did you kind of
Yeah.
find your own little personal gold mine?
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, yeah, when I first started trying to get into real estate, I was like everybody else, where I thought I had to go buy a house and fix it up and flip it, or buy a house and rent it out, something like that. What I found was that that is the highest competition thing that like everybody is trying to do when they start doing real estate. And you can certainly make money on that, but it's one of the hardest ways that I found to do it. And I was never able to
Hmm.
make it work because you got to take out loans, you have to work against the clock, you have to deal with deadbeat tenants and contractors and houses falling apart. I mean, just this huge list of negatives that is just very challenging. And when I discovered land, at first I was like, land? Like, why land? Like, how do you make money from that? There's no house to rent. Like, how does that even work? But what I was failing to realize initially is that it's not just buying land, it's buying land at a very, very, very cheap price. And that's what makes this all work. And it's surprisingly not that hard to find a lot of apathetic landowners out there who bought their land 10 or 20 years ago and they kind of forgot about it or their plans changed. Or maybe they inherited land from somebody in their family. So, like, they don't really care about it. It's not theirs. It's just a tax bill to them. And you can find these people and show up with a big green easy button and said, hey, I'll take this tax bill off your plate. I'll give you a cash offer. I can close quickly. And you'd be surprised how many people out there are happy to take that instead of
Mm.
a property that they don't even want. And when you buy anything like land or a car or jewelry or any asset out there, when you buy anything like that for less than half of what it's truly worth, it's not that hard to turn around, do nothing to the property and list it for sale and make money just by
Mm.
selling it for a price that's closer to its market value. But the benefit with land is that what you're really selling is just a deed. It's a piece of paper. So you don't have to
Mhm.
hold inventory of this stuff in your basement. It's out there wherever it is in the world. You've got the deed proving that it's yours. And when you sell it, you just create a new deed and sign it over to the new buyer. And it's just been an awesome business because unlike houses that have all these problems, mostly people problems to deal with, land doesn't have any of that stuff. There's nobody living on it. There's nothing that can get broken, stolen, or destroyed. You can buy a piece of land, and oftentimes when I buy land, I never even see the property. It's in
Mm.
states that I've never even been to. But I can get all the information I need to through things like Google Earth, finding a local realtor to drive by and get pictures for me, find a local drone photographer to get drone footage for me so I can really see what I'm getting. And I never have to leave my computer to do this.
Mm.
Whereas with houses, it's just a lot harder to do that. With houses, you have to like get into a property. You got to unlock the thing. You got to kick out the tenants and the rats that are living there. You have smells to deal with, just all this, stuff that makes it a lot harder and more complex. And land has very few of those things.
Mm.
So for me, it was a business that I found I could really succeed at. And I had a really hard time succeeding on the same level with anything else.
Mm. So you just kind of found like your golden goose and the thing that you were able to step into. So did you have a chunk of capital? Like, is this something where people need to have? Because I know in flipping in anything in real estate, you either need to have capital. Like you mentioned, you had to get loans. What was still the barrier of entry, even with buying up land? Because even though you're able to get it at a really good price, what's kind of the strategy you recommend? Like, if we're one of your students and we're one of your community members, what's kind of the framework of where you guide people to start?
Yeah, sure. I will say that when I got started, this was again back in 2009, I didn't have hardly any money. And that was one of the
Mm.
reasons this was attractive to me is because I didn't have to take out huge loans or go into debt. I didn't have to have 50,000 bucks to start with. I had about $3,000 and that was enough for me. I think it would be harder to do it with that little of cash today, simply because
Mm-hmm.
land has gotten more competitive today than it was back when I got started. Today, I would say more like 10 grand would be a good amount to start with, but it kind of depends on your strategy because you can get land under contract and then sell the property by assigning the contract to somebody else. You're basically selling the paper. And with that kind of strategy, you don't necessarily need that much cash to,
Mm-hmm.
pay off property owners and take title to their property. You can just sell the purchase agreement if you want to. So, but I think 10 grand is a nice healthy amount to start with. It gives you room to make some mistakes, which are bound to happen in the beginning. But it really depends on the sizes of properties you're going after and what those properties are worth. Just to give an example, like the first deal I ever did, it was a half-acre parcel of land in the county just to the north of where I live. And I sent out a few hundred yellow postcards, and one of the owners called me back, and I made him an offer for $331 cash. And this guy hadn't seen his property in 20 years. Like he had kind of just written it off. He didn't care about it. And he saw this offer. He's like, oh, okay, why don't I do that instead of paying taxes on this thing I don't want? And so I bought it from him, no loans involved. I closed on the thing myself, and then I listed it for sale on Craigslist. And 11 days later, I had sold it for $1,900 cash. So
Wow.
it wasn't, it's not like quit your job money. It's not that kind of thing yet. But just in that experience, I was like, wow, I didn't need a realtor for this. I didn't need a loan for this. I could do this all myself. I listed it for sale for free on Craigslist. And I realized, what if I just do a lot more of this or do
Mm.
bigger versions of this? And that's really what the business is all about.
Yeah. Well, just like in any business, you have to reinvest for a while. So what was kind of your timeline? Were you putting everything that you made from the sale back into investment? And then even on a tax level or a business setup level, at what point did you say, this is a business, this isn't just kind of like a side hustle where this is, these are transactions that are public, they're regulated to an extent. So what was kind of the process and what should people consider with setting up a business model in this way? And then what was your strategy with reinvesting and continuing to grow it versus
Yeah.
giving yourself some side hustle cash?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that I mentally struggle with to this day, and I talk to a lot of other people who do as well. Just this question of like, when can I pay myself, and how much do I
Mhm.
pay myself, versus just never-ending reinvestment into the business. And I don't know that there's like one right answer to that. It kind of depends on what your end goal is. For me, one of my goals was to take the cash that I made in land and then use that to buy rental properties or some kind of permanent asset that would throw
Mm.
off cash flow forever. Whereas
Mhm.
land is more of a, it can be very spiky in the income that it generates. Like you might make 50 grand from one deal, but then nothing for a couple months until you find another deal. But something like a rental property is constant cash flow month after month. So I'm more of the farmer mentality where I'm okay going slow, but building up a lot of sources of permanent income like that. So that was one of my goals. In
Mm.
knowing that, I didn't really take hardly any cash from the land business to pay myself. I just used it to buy rental properties and then those would pay me.
Mm.
But I know other people that do solely land flipping and nothing else. They have no aspirations to buy rentals or anything like that. And I think they kind of just figure out, well, it depends on how much cash I want to have set aside to pursue other properties. So they might carve out like 80% to keep reinvesting and 20% to live off of, whatever it is that they need to do. And this also varies a lot depending on whether you want to do land investing full time and have this be your only thing, in which case it kind of just changes the dynamic of how much money you need
Mm.
versus a part time gig, which is kind of what I've always done, where it's never been my full time thing. It's just a very powerful cash generating machine where you can make a full time income on a part time basis.
Yeah. So I know like we can view this as, oh, that's scarcity versus abundance mentality, but like logistically, are there enough pieces of land that somebody could, there's like so much opportunity for a lot of people to exclusively do that and make a decent amount or a great amount of money for a very long time? Or is this something that you can see the well drying up and like you're kind of going the smarter route with investing in more of those long term, properties that are going to continue to give the passive income? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think people might hear this and say, well, how much land could there really be to keep flipping? At some point, you kind of hit a maximum or you run out of property to flip. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah. It's a really great question. So a few things on that. In terms of if there's enough land to flip, absolutely. And the reason I say that is because um, I believe about 6% of all of the land in the United States is developed,
Hmm.
which means there's something built
Wow.
on it, whether it's a house or a building. So that leaves a lot more land out there that's vacant land. So, in couple that with the fact that most real estate investors are going after that 6% of developed land, and the other portion is not. You just do the math. Like there's a lot more
Hmm.
land out there to choose from that most real estate investors are ignoring. Now, the caveat to that is a lot of that land is like government, federal, state land. So, like, we can't really buy it anyway. So, it's not
Hmm.
quite that cut and dry. But even then, there's a lot of land out there.
Hmm.
And in terms of if the well is ever going to dry up, so I don't see that happening. But what I do think has happened and will probably continue to happen is that as there are more and more land investors getting into the business, it changes the dynamic of competition. Like, for example,
Hmm.
when I got started, there was literally no competition, period. Like, I could make a super low offer to anybody, and there was nobody else behind me. Like, if they didn't want to sell it to me, they weren't going to sell the thing.
Hmm.
Whereas now, there are other people out there. And if they don't sell it to me, they might have another offer waiting. So, what that means is I either have to offer more than I used to, or I have to bring some value to the table that they're not getting from these other people, like the
Hmm.
ability to close faster, or in terms of offering more. I know for many years, all I ever did with vacant land was just buy it and sell it. I didn't touch them. I didn't improve these vacant lots at all. I didn't subdivide them. I didn't change the zoning. I didn't get it entitled. There's a lot of things you can do to land to make it worth more. Even without building a house on it, you could still, put a driveway into it or a fence around it or bring utilities to it or put a well in. I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do. And I didn't do any of that.
Mm.
But with more competition, it basically just means that there may be cases where if you want the deal, you'll have to offer more, and you can offer more if you're willing to do those things to improve them. It almost
Mhm.
turns into a little bit more of the house flipping game, still much simpler, but in terms of like rehabbing a property or cleaning junk off of it or trimming back the weeds, anything like that, it's not as dead nut simple as it used to be, where you can just do literally nothing. There are cases
Yeah.
where you might want to just be ready to do some of that stuff because that can
Mhm.
justify a higher price, which will then get you the deal, whereas you couldn't have gotten it before. So I do think that is changing and will continue to change. But in terms of just the opportunity, there's an ocean of opportunity out there. It's just the
Mm.
the math changes a little bit.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So fascinating. And I think it's just like anything, right? You can kind of take it, well, there's no competition, low barrier of entry, and then more people kind of come onto this. You just have to think of different strategic ways to make your investment worth it, make it pay
Yeah.
off a little bit higher. And I think it is interesting to consider, like, there's a lot of big corporations. It's not just like it's not an under the radar thing. There's a lot of land, big chunks of land that are being bought up. And so I love that your approach is, this is one way to start funding something else. This is a great way to go in. And I think, again, that principle applies to so many businesses. Flipping anything is so smart: buy low, sell high. That's essentially how so many different companies and big brands start, is with something as simple and unsexy as that.
Yeah.
So talk us through kind of your strategy with, I know you mentioned you had that bigger picture in mind of what you wanted to do. And so how long were you flipping the land, and are you still flipping land? I'm curious to know about that too. And at what point were you like, okay, this is enough, and I'm going to start transitioning and focusing more on properties and things that generate a different level of income?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I am still flipping land, but the diet, no, what's the word? I guess the game has changed in terms of how much of that I'm doing. So as the land business has gotten more and more players involved with it, one thing that has sort of come out of the woodwork is this idea of funding land deals, where
Mm-hmm.
a land flipper will bring a deal to me and I can fund it for him. So I didn't have to do the work of finding the deal and talking to the motivated seller. I just get to review it and say, hey, is this a good deal or not? And if it is, I'll give you my money and
Mm.
I'll pay for everything, but you do the work of finding the deal. Sometimes we'll divvy up the responsibility for getting the property sold. That can look different in different situations, um, but essentially, when you partner with a land operator, as I call it, whereas I'm the funder, they're the operator who found the deal. Depending on what's involved in that project, we might split the profits 50-50, or maybe 60-40, or maybe 70-30, with one of us getting more than the other. Again, depending on who had to do what in the deal. But the benefit for the operator who found the deal is they don't have to have all the money, which is actually
Mm.
a huge deal, because if a property costs $100,000 to buy, and a lot of us don't have 100 grand cash just sitting around waiting for that. But as a funder, I do, and I can help
Mm-hmm.
with that. So it sort of allows two different parties to work together. And that's totally worth it for me, because I know that it takes time to find these deals
Yeah.
and, put the pieces together. So that's more of what I'm doing in the land business now. I do own several properties myself, but they kind of have just come out across my desk unintentionally. Whereas the thing that I'm actually trying to do more of is funding deals like that. And kind of as a separate thing, I've also been getting into the self-storage business over the past few years. And ultimately, I think that's kind of where I want my end game to go, just because they're long-term, permanent sources of cash flow with big depreciation write-offs, whereas land doesn't have a whole lot of tax benefits or depreciation write-offs that houses and storage facilities do. So,
Mm.
and I think really any land investor out there, um, not everybody would agree with me, but I think they should always be thinking of ways to work themselves out of the land business, which can be kind of
Mm-hmm.
a hard thing to do because land pays really well, but it's kind of a hamster wheel. It's a hamster wheel that pays great, and because it pays so well, it can almost be like golden handcuffs, because you're not going to get that good of returns on most other things, like 100, 200% ROI. It's very rare. So it's hard to take that cash and put it into something that pays less of an ROI. But in my mind, I'm more after the permanent passive sources of income. I'd rather
Hmm.
have less of that than way more work going after the higher ROI stuff. I think for a lot of land investors, it just sort of changes over time. When you're getting started, like you're hungry for deals, you're willing to do the work. But after 10, 15 years of doing it, it's like, okay, I don't know if I want to do this forever. It's like my main
Hmm.
thing. How can I find stuff that's more passive in nature? So that's
Hmm.
kind of my mindset. And I think if other people out there have a similar mindset, they should always be thinking about what's next after land.
Yeah. I'm curious, going back even just to the land investing itself, not that we've strayed away from that too much.
Yeah.
A lot of times you see big, big money, like family money, inheritance money, through holding on to properties for a really long time. And then suddenly a developer comes in. Have you held on to properties for an extended period of time, knowing that there's like this anticipated point in which you could sell this for way more? And there's an advantage to just kind of collecting and holding on to some, or most of your deals flipping pretty quickly?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you're referring to is land banking, which is
Mm,
definitely one of the sub strategies of land investing. I haven't done a ton of that because, I mean, it's a process that can take 5, 10, 20, 30 years to do. Usually my mentality going into this is like, I want to sell the thing as quickly as possible, get in, get out, and move on to the next thing. That's kind of how you get the real big influxes of cash and the high ROI. Is the
mm-hmm,
faster you can make it happen, the better. But certainly, I think there are situations where that can make a lot of sense if you have some good clues that growth is going in a certain direction and you're right in the middle of that direction where it's growing to, or if you have situations where it's, I don't know if it's luck or what, but Meta decides to build a $10 billion data center right in your backyard, and all of a sudden your land is worth more. It's hard to plan for that kind of thing, but that stuff can happen. So I,
mm-hmm,
I think usually that kind of land banking play can make a lot more sense if it's, say, farmland or something like that,
mm-hmm.
where it's making money along the way. It's not like it's just costing you property taxes. If there's a way you can like monetize that, like lease it out to somebody, maybe a solar farm or billboards or cell phone towers or things like that,
Mm.
and then eventually sell it to somebody who will use it for something even more valuable, then that can definitely make sense. But again, my strategy is usually just flip the thing and move on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting you brought that up too, because I don't know any of the terminology. Land banking is not something I was familiar with.
Yeah, sure.
But I also loved hearing you kind of delve into or just introduce a few ideas and ways that you can leverage the land while you have it and make sure that it's serving some kind of a purpose. Have you come across this? I'm sure you have, with people who will buy the land, and maybe they, obviously this requires some subdeveloping and investment into the land itself, but even like leasing out the land. I know that
Yeah.
in Southern California there were places where you weren't just paying the mortgage, you were also having to pay for the property. It was like a separate thing. Do you
Mhm.
see that happening where people are just kind of holding their stake in the land and you don't ever fully own it?
Yeah. Well, are you talking
The
about?
buyers, like the buyers are the leasing people, like you're just leasing out land and people can kind of use it for different purposes. And then
Yeah.
after 10 years, you sell the land.
Yeah. I mean, there's many different versions of this. Like, for example, in the commercial real estate world, this is much more common in like Southern California, where land is super expensive, where somebody could own commercial land and lease it to a big company like Walgreens or something. And Walgreens builds their building on it, and they've got a lease for like 50 years. And
Mm,
so you don't, as a landowner, you don't own the building, just the land. And so you can get paid that. So that's one way to do it. But usually, more common ways to do this, where you monetize land over the long term, would be say if you want to lease out a small portion of your land for like a cell phone tower or for a billboard on the side of a highway, or wind turbines, or solar farms, or even leasing it to a mobile home owner. That's a really common way you can do this, where you keep the land itself and you don't have to deal with any of the stuff that's on it because somebody else owns that and they're going to
mm-hmm,
maintain it. And I love that idea because you can just, I mean, it's basically a hands-off source of income.
mm-hmm.
And I guess the downside is you still don't get any depreciation write-offs, but if you want to have just like super low maintenance income, that's a great way to do it. And I think
Yeah.
if you're trying to do the land banking play, it makes a lot of sense to make sure something like that is intertwined with the deal to make sure it's not losing you money as you're waiting.
Mm, okay, cool. see things I wouldn't have even considered to just kind of offset those costs that you have if you want a longer term. But for you, just kind of coming back to your strategy, it's let's find really low opportunities, create a big chunk of cash, and then let's go and build something else. Let's build some other income streams. So right now you mentioned the storage units. How come you saw that as like a good opportunity? I know you've kind of already talked about why you don't love the house flipping. There's so much nuance and a lot of things that you just are not willing to do and that make it really
Yeah.
difficult. So where did you first kind of see the opportunity, and was it always the plan of let's go into self-storage? I know you mentioned this was always a plan to scale out of land. But what is the opportunity there people should be aware of, and what kind of goes into all of that?
Yeah, sure. Well, so self-storage, it has been on my radar for a long time. As I mentioned earlier, originally what I was doing with land was taking some of that cash and buying rental properties.
Mm,
And I think that's a viable way to do it, but I wasn't really doing it right. I had bought a couple of duplexes and it just wasn't enough income to make it that worthwhile. Just wasn't that exciting to me. So what I did, I think it was in 2017, was I sold my two duplexes and I just kind of pocketed the cash. And eventually I started learning about self-storage, and it was way more attractive to me because it's much more scalable than rental
mm,
properties are. Uh, so I built my first storage facility in 2021 is when I started building it. And the cool thing about it is my facility's got 170 doors or units on it. And I can increase everybody's rent by $5 a month or $10 a month. And just in that small change that none of them are even really going to care about or notice, I've just made the property worth way more because
mm,
now you have this multiple of 170 and years into the future, how much income that's going to generate. And that's a really cool thing with self storage. And also with self storage, nobody's sleeping there. There's no plumbing. Like there's none of these complexities that make rental properties a nightmare. Like they're just
mm-hmm.
not there for self storage. It's not that there's no problems. I mean, sometimes you'll get crazy people who do try to sleep in their units. You have to kick them out, but it's not that common of a thing. By and large, it's just a much simpler type of property to manage. It doesn't cost much. It's people aren't calling you at 3 a.m. So just from a management standpoint, that's the kind of thing I can be willing to sign up for. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to do that with rental properties. And even when you hire a property manager for your rental properties, a lot of them are terrible and they don't do that good of a job. Whereas again, self-storage, there's just not as many wrinkles and complications to it. So it's just easier to
Yeah.
deal with.
Hmm. So when you came into this, were you buying units that already existed, or were you going into full build and maybe even like buying land and then being like, how can we leverage this land? Let's build a whole self-storage unit on it. Because I'm
Yeah.
curious where you'd recommend the best place to start if you have some capital or you have some partnership money that you want to build a passive income stream with this. What's kind of the best place to begin?
Yeah. Well, I think in a perfect world, and this is actually what I tried at first, it didn't work for me. Um, in a perfect world, it's great to buy an existing storage facility that has some extra land. So you
Mm,
basically have the benefit of cash flow from day one, right when you buy it, with none of the hassles of construction. And there's plenty of hassles to that. But you can also build more and add more value if and when you want to. That's kind of like the best case scenario. But the problem I was having was that in 2020, when I started doing this, uh, it was, obviously during COVID, and self storage was like crazy profitable. Like people were making tons of money on the storage facilities. And of everybody I contacted to try to buy their existing facility, everybody wanted like twice as much as what their facilities were worth. So I just couldn't find deals out there. And I realized through doing that people actually were buying these things for way more than they were worth. I was like, man, I could probably build one. And even if I totally screwed this up, I could still probably sell it empty and make money on it. And that was true at the time when I
mm,
decided to start doing it. Normally, I'm not the kind of person that builds stuff like this. It's kind of a risky proposition. There's lots of complexities involved. But just seeing the environment, I was like, let's give this a shot. And being a YouTuber like I am, I thought, I could probably make some great videos on this, like showing people how to build a storage facility and what my experience was like. So that was a lot of fun too. And the drawback to building like I did is that when you finally open for business, you have a completely empty facility with no cash flow, and it takes years for this thing to fill up. And for me, I think from the date that I bought the land to when construction was finished and we actually stopped losing money was about 3 years. for that.
Mm.
And that was about $450,000 of cash that I had to put into that. So it's, just from those numbers, like there's some drawbacks to it, to
Mhm.
building brand new. I mean, and there's risk too. Like it's possible that it won't fill up as fast as you think. And we had like, I think $170,000 of cash set aside just because we knew it was going to take time for this thing to fill up. So it's one of those things, if you do build from scratch like that, you don't want to be undercapitalized. You want to make sure you're ready for those challenges because they will come up.
Hmm. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love, like I said, I love where I sit and I get to learn so many things. And it just, we take advantage of these things as consumers. And when you just flip the lens and look at this from the place of a business owner and how these things need to get built and all of the considerations, it's just so cool. I love seeing behind the curtain of how you took the cash that you had created from land investing and were able to turn that into something else. Very different scenario than when you started with just like a few hundred or $10,000 into being able to
Yeah.
invest hundreds of thousands into something. And
Yeah.
it shows you don't need to have this like crazy unique thing. You can just take what's here. Where's the opportunity? How can I follow that opportunity and then turn that into more? I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm actually
Absolutely.
curious. I want to pivot a little bit because I can see that there's probably some similarities in what you've done in the very physical sense with buying up properties and investing in the land, into now what you're doing with content. You mentioned you have a YouTube channel, you have this whole education side to your business. There's kind of a similar principle there too. Like you're kind of investing in digital real estate and you're putting things out there that can compound and bring more income. So talk to me about that transition. When did that piece of your business come in? I know you mentioned this in the beginning, kind of the shift into RE Tipster, but
Yeah.
are you seeing that there's kind of the similar approach to where you can come in and capitalize in a different way when you have a strategic approach to content?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I guess the similarities are that if you're willing to put in the time and the effort without any guarantee of anything working out or anybody caring, there's a lot you can do with that. As I'm sure you're probably familiar as being a content creator yourself with this podcast, uh, you know, it you kind of have to care about it and be willing to go out on a limb and maybe nobody will care about this. And I had to do that for years. The reason I was able to do it and still do it to this day is because I really love this. Like, it's just fun to me. Even if I was making no money from it, like, I'd still probably want to do it. It's just fun. So that helps a lot. And I think you kind of have to love your thing if you're going to survive long term, because with most business startups, like, there's going to be a good long period where it's pretty thankless and you're in an echo chamber, and it can be kind of tricky if you don't actually love what you're doing. But so yeah, the similarities are that it takes plenty of time to build content that changes people's lives and people care
Mm-hmm.
about, and ultimately make something that people are willing to pay for. And the differences, though, are that uh, the world of social media and Google and all this stuff, the places that direct people to RA Tipster, and whether it's the podcast or the blog or the YouTube channel or whatever it is, that has changed a lot over the time. When I first started doing this, Google worked very differently from how it does now. And, most of these social media platforms don't really want you to leave them. They want to keep you on Facebook or on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. So if you put a link to your website, like, they might just kind of hide it from a lot of people because they don't want people to leave Facebook. So trying to figure out how to work with those platforms that many people spend a lot of their time on and still get your stuff seen has been kind of a tricky challenge. And I don't know that I've ever really had it figured out, um, but it's just kind of it's a unique uh, tool, I guess, just because it can help you a lot, but it can also work against you if you're not aware of how those algorithms kind of work.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned like when you were getting into the storage unit, you were also seeing that as an opportunity for content. So I'm seeing that there's like multiple layers of service that you're able to provide. You're able to serve the real estate community as a whole. You're able to create these great educational opportunities, and you're still funding your own business in the process. So is that kind of what drives some of your content? Are you able to really just continue to share what has worked? Are you still very much working in the industry so that you have relevant information to share with your
Yeah.
audience? Like how's that all kind of working together in an ecosystem?
Yeah, it's kind of all the above. So I've got my own experiences and trials that I go through every day in my various businesses, whether it's land or self storage, just things that are kind of hard. And I don't know how to solve the problems yet, but I put a lot of time into figuring those things out. And even if it's not solving the problem necessarily, just acknowledging that it's a problem. And like,
Mhm.
you know, like for example, trying to think, in my self-storage facility, we had this issue in the winter a couple months ago where water was melting, dripping off the roof, and then freezing our doors shut. So people couldn't get into their units. And I still don't have this issue figured out, but just being willing to talk about that and say, hey, this is a very non-glamorous part of being a self-storage facility owner. It's just super annoying. It's a problem. I'm working to figure it out. Here's the ideas I have so far. I don't know which one is the right answer yet, but this is what I'm working on. Just being real like that, I think people appreciate, especially if
Mhm.
people are going through the exact same problem, because they can be like, yes, finally a breath of fresh air. This person's not trying to sell me on anything. If they're just talking about the same problem I have, I'm going to keep following until he figures it out. And you kind of build a relationship with these people. And it doesn't mean they're going to pay you money or buy anything from you anytime in the next year or 2 years or 3 years, but someday they might. And even
Mhm.
just, the tiny little minuscule amount of ad revenue that YouTube can generate and that kind of thing, when you create hundreds of different sources of tiny areas of monetization, it can add up to a lot over time. And it
Mhm.
kind of comes in a passive way because there's videos I made 5 or 10 years ago that are still making me small amounts of money today, but I don't spend any time on that anymore. It's just out there doing its job, serving the right people. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's like that crossover I mentioned a little bit ago where you have a little bit of the same concept there. Like you put a little bit of time, you're not maybe paying for land, physical land, but you're paying for that digital real estate and it can continue to pay dividends for a long, long time.
yeah.
Um, so for you, you kind of stepped into this and you're like, oh, I actually really love this. I love sharing this. This is helping people. Talk to me a little bit about building your personal brand. Like you have this thing you do, and I think sometimes people go to build online empires and they think, I'll just teach the thing. But where did you realize you needed to actually have a brand so it wasn't just information and it was really a transformation, a person they could connect to?
Yeah. That's a great question. I honestly don't even know that I'm that great at this. It's things I've kind of learned over the years, but I mean, just in terms of the brand itself. So, whenever I talk about anything real estate related, I try to tie it to the RE Tipster brand. And probably the first mistake I made was naming it RE Tipster because people don't know how to say it right, or they call it REI Tipster and that kind of thing. So, if I could redo it, I would probably pick a much simpler name that people can't easily mistake. It's totally my fault. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of building your personal brand, a lot of it has to do with uh, I think of the way I heard it said uh, is a blog is only as interesting as the interest shown in others. So
Mm,
I see some people going about this wrong sometimes where they kind of just puff themselves up and they show, look at this check from this deal I just did. Like I've done thousands of deals and look at my Ferrari and look at this bag of cash. Like I'm so awesome. And it's like, people don't care about you.
mhm,
Care about themselves. Like, how can you help them? Like the only time it's relevant for me to talk about my own success is if that listener can do the exact same thing, or at least use that directly to improve their own lives. So I think some people just I don't know if they get into this for ego reasons or what, but they kind of have this idea that like, I'm going to be a celebrity. People are going to love me. And that may be true, but only if you really help a person get where they want to go. Ultimately,
mhm,
people don't really care that much about you as much as they do about themselves. And I just try to keep that in mind with everything I do is that this is only helpful if I'm really changing that person's life as they watch this. Like every piece of content I make, it's got to have at least that possibility of changing their lives, or it's not worth making.
mhm.
But just in terms of like branding yourself, like helps to have a good logo, helps to get some good high quality pictures of yourself, just so you kind of look legit. People can instantly see Seth Williams and be like, oh yeah, he looks like the real deal. Like he's got
Mhm.
stuff well put together. But ultimately, it just comes down to, I think, creating content that can really change people's lives. And that
Yeah.
takes direct experience and a lot of time to do it.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. So, what kind of investments in your business? And I guess I'm speaking, I would kind of like to hear the answer for both, but let's talk specifically about your education side of your business, your personal brand. What kinds of investments like technology, content creation, marketing have provided the greatest return on investment? Like where would you say spend more time on this than anything else?
So I guess there's a couple different ways to answer that. Like, I guess one area where I've invested just a obscene amount of time over the years is just making videos. And I don't
Mm,
even think I'm that good at it still, but I know that every video I've made and just going through the process of like, what am I gonna say in this video? And then recording it with good lighting and good audio, and then getting the thing edited and just like making a good video. There's a huge challenge to that, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. So just like
mhm.
doing this stuff more and more and more. I'm sure you can totally relate. Like the more people you interview, like you just learn to ask better questions and you fix audio problems, and uh, it all adds up to an increasingly higher quality product the more you do it.
Mhm.
But were you asking in terms of like technology, like software I pay for or gear that I've bought? Is that kind of how you
Yeah.
meant the
I mean,
question, or?
I think in those things are like hard to say because you need all three of them. You need some technology, you need content creation, and you have to invest in marketing. So those are probably hard to pair against each other. But I just think like the most potent thing, maybe even specifically talking about technology, that we should consider if we really want to have success with building a personal brand and putting out content online.
Yeah, well, I mean, another thing that I've been learning, definitely not an expert at this yet, but I've been seeing the importance of it more and more, sending out emails to my email list. Like for the longest time, I had no idea what I was doing. In some ways, I still don't really know, but I would just kind of send emails just to like say helpful stuff. But it wasn't like the emails weren't written to get the reader to take any action. It was just kind of giving without asking for anything
Mhm.
or motivating them to do anything. But I've been learning that like it's really important to get people to do stuff. Like that's the point of it, is to
Mhm.
motivate people to take action. Sometimes that might result in them buying something from me, sometimes not. But
Mhm.
if there's not like a very specific call to action to get a person to improve their lives in some way, then you're kind of just wasting everybody's time.
Yeah.
So, the like for example, the software I use for sending out emails is Go High Level. I used to use Drip, but I moved to Go High Level this past year. And that's made things a lot easier just in terms of scaling it, and it's made it cheaper too. But like the tool is not nearly as important as understanding like how and why you're using it, like having a really
Mhm.
well thought out plan. And I gotta say, things like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini are just insanely useful for not just like doing the thing, but even getting educated in terms of like, how should I be doing this?
Mhm.
Like, challenge my assumptions here. What am I not seeing? Like, ChatGPT is like, I almost see it as like the discovery of fire. Like, it is
Mhm.
such a big deal if you understand how to use it and really push it to its limit, because it can take you a long way if you understand. I mean, it's like having the smartest person in the world right there who has
Mhm.
access to all the world's information, can distill it down in a very easy to understand way. So, uh, that's probably one of my most used resources this past year or two, is just using ChatGPT to get answers
Mm.
to like everything. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think I read something like, have you leveraged AI even in the real estate business itself? Like, are you seeing a use case for that to help optimize and help? Like, are you sharing any of that information with your audience, your listeners? And how are you using it? Because now that we've seen kind of how you're leveraging it with your digital marketing efforts in the real estate industry, are you seeing opportunities that are very up and coming? And what have you kind of dived into?
Yeah, absolutely. So my friend Mike and I, we actually ran a couple of AI guided courses this past year, and we've got a school community. It's pulseinnercircle.com, where we've got recordings of all the stuff that we put together. But man, we could talk for hours about that. There's so much that it can do in real estate, just like in
Mm,
any other industry. Like, for example, I've got a custom GPT that I made when I need to evaluate a new self storage facility. Normally, that process takes me about 45 minutes, where I plug a bunch of stuff into a spreadsheet and just research the heck out of it. And in many, many cases, I'll spend 45 minutes to find out this is not a good deal. Don't do it. And
mm-hmm.
it's like, what if I could get that answer in like 10 seconds instead of
Mm,
45 minutes? And that's what custom GPTs can do for you. So I created this one that I basically have to give it 5 key pieces of information, and then it makes a lot of assumptions that I have told it to make. And it'll basically give me a rating of 1 to 10, 10 being, this is a great deal, go after it, 1 being, this is terrible, run away from it, or somewhere in between.
mm,
So that's one of many examples, but even like ChatGPT, they're they recently got a major upgrade to their image generation where you can give it any existing image and tell it to change anything about that image, and it'll do a remarkably good job at it. So, for example, I can, give it an image of an empty room in my house, or even a room that has stuff in it, and say, I want you to redesign this room with IKEA furniture that you think is going to look good. And I want you to give me a shopping list of all the pieces of furniture that you put in here.
Wow.
And it does an awesome job. Like, it looks stunningly real. And so, I mean, that's just one of, you could do a similar thing. Say if I take a picture of an empty storage unit and say, hey, put stuff in here that you think people would normally store, like put boxes and shelves and equipment in here, and alter the image. And it'll do that and look remarkably real, just to help people visualize how they could store things in their unit. So
Hmm.
just that alone, the image manipulation is a huge deal.
Yeah, just replicating your brain, and not even your brain plus a super brain to be able to give
Yeah,
context to that and
for
make
sure.
those decisions quicker. How long did it take you to like trust the custom GPT? Like, were you still going back and fine tuning and making sure that you as a person would have made the same assumption after
Yeah,
letting it run its thing?
it's a great question. And I think that will, I don't know if this will ever go away, but,
Hmm.
uh, ChatGPT hallucinating is a very real thing where it will give you answers that sound plausible and right, but they're wrong. And you would
Hmm.
only know that if you knew ahead of time. So I think that's something to always be aware of. I don't ever trust the answers verbatim. Like, I always kind of assume I have to double check it, but usually it's right. And
Hmm.
if anything, it's like an 80-20 lever where it can just do a lot of the heavy lifting for me, just get me a lot closer to the finish line without me having to take every step myself. So yeah, I mean, anytime I get an output from a ChatGPT, I'm always sort of running it through my own filter and trying to verify, like, is this right? Is this right?
Mm.
And, usually it is. But
Yeah.
occasionally there will be things that aren't quite there. And I think that's anybody who's using ChatGPT should be aware that it can and does hallucinate sometimes. And I think
Hmm.
it'll get better and better at not doing that as we get further along. Like, ChatGPT has this deep research thing now where you can ask it a question and it'll take 20 minutes to get back to you because
Mm.
it's searching all over the internet and doing all kinds of logic and giving you a really detailed report. So you can really understand all of its context and how it came up with its answers. So that kind of thing is a big step in the right direction, I think. Just understanding, like, is this right? And
Hmm.
give me more information to sink my teeth into to make that decision for myself instead of just blindly accepting whatever ChatGPT tells me.
Yeah. Do you see it having the capacity to go find deals for you? Like, have you ever tried that, to have it do that deep research to find land and giving it certain criteria? Maybe it's like, oh, don't give my secrets away yet. This might be a great way for people to jump into that. But do you think
Man,
that that's the direction that we could be heading to?
you're asking great questions. I just gotta say,
Oh.
it's fun answering these things. I can tell you're thinking through this the right way. So I have tried that. I have not tried it recently though. So when I have
Mm.
tried it, it was like maybe 9 or 12 months ago, and I didn't find that it could do that at that
Mm-hmm.
point. Like, it couldn't go search the internet to find all this stuff for me. But with the new deep research thing, like, it might be able to. Honestly, I haven't
Mm-hmm.
tried it yet, but given that it's actually like really going out there and digging deep into what's on the internet, um, I wouldn't expect it to like get me all the way to the finish line, but it could probably give me some pretty solid insights on that
Mm.
stuff. And I do see the day when that probably is going to be a thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something you should tap into and leverage, and
Yeah,
not just
absolutely.
teach the criteria, but like literally provide the GPT to help people go and find those deals. That's, I think it's
Yeah,
so crazy how we are leveling up in that way, and our brains are going to take a minute to catch up to the fact
yeah,
that things that we've just felt like needed to be hard don't have to be hard anymore. Or
yeah,
and I hope we never fully trust the technology and just
yeah,
pass off all thinking. But it is crazy to think that we're headed in that direction. And there's so many opportunities for you, for me, as creators, and everybody listening. Consider that. Like, it's not too late to step in and be an educator. It's not too late to step into any industry, but just as long as you're combining an understanding of where things are moving and the direction that we're going with technology, you can really step into this transition point, this in between, and make a lot of money as we're still figuring this stuff out. So I
yeah,
love it. We've jumped all over the place. I appreciate you talking about land investing and self
yeah. It's been
storage, and
fun.
then your personal brand marketing. I'm like, hopefully everybody has been able to kind of follow the thread here. But I love hearing from people like you who have those multifaceted pieces of their expertise that are true entrepreneurs in every sense of the word, just like being willing to try out new things, respond to the marketplace, find ways that they can continue to serve. So, what's the best place for people to connect with you off of this podcast?
Yeah. Well, retipster.com is kind of like the home base for everything.
Okay.
But if you're on any social media platform, if you search for retipster, you can find me where I'm at there as well. I'm probably most active on Facebook and YouTube, just because that's where my audience tends to hang out the most. But I'm on all of them, so feel free to
Cool.
reach out if you find me there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate you sharing all of the things, not leaving anything off the table. It's been great to learn from you.
Yes, thanks, Kirsten. It's been great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.